Okay. Start with figuring out what does health look like for me, physically, mentally, emotionally, and work really hard on being good at it.
Healthy mind, healthy body, healthy life. Soul Food on Smooth 98.1.
Welcome to Soul Food right here on Smooth 98.1, where we love music and we love life. It's 5 minutes past 8 o'clock. Sorry. And we are now live everywhere, from the website to YouTube, where we're streaming live, which is youtube.com/smooth 91 FM Lagos. Again, youtube.com/smooth 91 FM Lagos. Of course, you know that allows you to not only stream now, drop your comment, but also to share to somebody who might not be in the same location with you. They might not even be in the same time zone with you. And aside that, you can go back to watch what we have talked about this morning, so you do not miss out on any and you implement everything we'll be sharing. We'll be talking about the issue of dandruff. Dandruff, I told you earlier that reports say it is something that plagues about half of the world's population. From the young to the old, it has ravaged many. It has been quite embarrassing. And for some, it is beyond just flaky scalp. So we want to understand what it is today and how to deal with it. And I have one of our favorite consultant physicians and dermatologists who is taking time out of our personal schedule this morning to be my guest, and I do not take it for granted at all. I'm referring to the dancing doctor, that is Dr. Folakemi Cole-Adeife. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. Good morning, Lagos. Good morning, Sharon. How are you doing?
I am fine. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. All right, let's quickly cut the time and get straight to the point. First, if there is any other definition of dandruff aside what has dealt with a lot of people, what exactly will it be? So if there is a medical or layman definition of dandruff, what is it?
So, well, dandruff is, like you mentioned, the flaky and itchy scalp that, affects up to 50% of people at some point in their life. So there's like a 50% lifetime incidence of dandruff for most people. For the world. And most people at one point in time or the other will have dandruff. However, there are various types of dandruff. Most people will experience the mild, white, flaky scalp, while other people may have more severe forms of dandruff. And that is usually referred to as seborrheic dermatitis. And seborrheic dermatitis, can become a medical condition and can involve not only the scalp, but can also involve other parts of the body like the face, the chest, and the back. So with mild dandruff, well, generally dandruff is caused by a particular or associated with a particular fungal organism that lives on the skin normally. But when that organism, that fungi, which is called Malassezia, when it tends to overgrow, or there's an imbalance of the organisms or the microbiological species on the skin or in the scalp, and there's an overgrowth of the Malassezia or a type of Malassezia that can be irritating to the skin, that can result in dandruff or more severe forms of dandruff. Some people just have itchy, flaky scalp, which is due to dryness of the scalp, while other people would have dandruff that is related to irritation by this yeast called Malassezia, and that is typically called seborrheic dermatitis.
I'm curious, is this genetically linked?
Well, in most cases it can be, but it's not. Genetics is not the only association. It can be associated with a myriad of things like hormonal imbalance. It can be related to medical treatment. So certain treatments can predispose. For instance, recurrent antibiotic therapy, which can affect, the normal microbiome on the skin or the scalp. Some people, it could be their hair care practices. Maybe they may be using something that is actually triggering the overgrowth of the Malassezia yeast, and that's what is causing worsening dandruff. So there are so many things that could be triggering dandruff. For some people, it could just be that they'd forget to moisturize their scalp, which is also skin. Just like we have skin on the body, if you don't moisturize it, it can get dry and flaky. So if you don't moisturize your scalp, you can get a mild form of dandruff that would result in, flakiness and dryness of the scalp. But for some people, it's much more than not just moisturizing the scalp. And then in some cases, it may not actually be dandruff, where it's very thick and scaly. You want to exclude things like psoriasis. Psoriasis of the scalp, for many people, has been misdiagnosed as very bad dandruff. And that's why when dandruff gets very problematic or very severe, it's always better to see a dermatologist for proper evaluation, because for some people, it could actually be psoriasis and not severe dandruff, because in many cases, it's difficult to distinguish between the two without doing some further tests, on the skin.
Well, I imagine a regular, an average, typical Nigerian would not get up from their house and say, hey, I have had this dandruff and I think I have issues. So I want to know practically, in simple terms, at what point should a person seek the help of maybe of a dermatologist or physician, as the case may be, when they have what they think is dandruff, but might not be dandruff?
Well, I would advise that, once dandruff goes beyond just mild scaliness or flakiness, you should try and see a dermatologist. But the symptoms that would make one to become very, very concerned would include things like some degree of hair loss, which can occur when the dandruff is very severe. Severe itching, of course, then clumpy scales. Like sometimes you see some people, when they're combing the hair, it's actually bringing off like clumps of scales, which could be yellowish and sometimes may also bleed. So if you're scraping off the scales on your scalp and there is some little bleeding or it becomes painful, you should see a dermatologist. And also with people who have, as mentioned, the hair loss, people who have what we call greasy scales. So the scales are very oily and very unsightly. You want to see a dermatologist. Most people don't realize that dermatologists manage conditions of the scalp, and so they may go to the hair salon and ask their hair stylist to recommend some cream or potion, or when the hairstylist is doing the hair, they say, oh, you have bad dandruff, and they start to recommend things. That has even happened to me because I have dandruff sometimes. And when I go to the salon, they're like, oh, you have dandruff. Let me give you this mixed cream and all. And I just smile and say, oh, thank you. So I imagine a lot of people too would have that. But it's very important that you don't just limit your treatment of dandruff to that, particularly if there's associated hair loss. With hair loss, you want to see your dermatologist as quickly as possible because some kinds of hair loss can be irreversible. Luckily, the hair loss associated with seborrheic dermatitis is reversible rather. The hair can grow back when the dandruff is properly treated, which is good. But with all hair loss, if it's not treated early enough, it can become more permanent. So you want to make sure that you get appropriate treatment. And some of the treatment for dandruff has to be oral tablets not just things you put on your hair. You have to treat it from inside. And in some cases, you may need to use some prescription medications that your stylist or beauty, your hair stylist will not be able to recommend for you. So it's very essential that you try to see a doctor, particularly a dermatologist. If a person has long-term and difficult to treat or worsening dandruff, please don't just write it off. It's a medical condition and should be treated by a dermatologist.
Thank you so much for that clarification. I still want to get further though. When can it be classified as long-term? How many months, weeks, years can it be classified as, this is one demon?
So usually if you have recurrent or persistent dandruff for more than 2 to 3 months, most times the cutoff is 3 months, you want to say that this is like chronic. Some people may have recurrent dandruff, usually when their hair is rough, after they've had a hairstyle for like 4 to 5 weeks. They may have a bit of scaliness because they haven't washed their scalp. And once they wash the scalp, the scaliness, and moisturize the scalp, it goes away. That is not really something that you need to worry too much about. Although in that, usually we would recommend that you use over-the-counter anti-dandruff shampoo. There are quite a few, there are not a few, but there are a few anti-dandruff shampoos that are available over the counter that can treat very mild dandruff. Those that contain what we call zinc pyrithione. I know there are a few brands, but if you check for zinc pyrithione containing shampoos, usually that will treat mild dandruff. So whenever you do wash your hair, you just wash it with an anti-dandruff shampoo and make sure you moisturize your scalp. Moisturizing the scalp is as important as moisturizing other parts of the skin. But if a person is having very thick, like I mentioned, scaly thick scales that you can actually pull off, associated with a lot of itching and some bleeding and hair loss, and this is occurring for more than 2 months at a stretch, you would say it's more chronic, and it's better that you see a dermatologist for review. So for mild dandruff, you may not need to see them. Just like with mild breakouts, when you use, acne, you can use an anti-acne face wash, and that would control it, But where it comes to this point where you have, a very large breakout on the face, huge and all that, you want to see a dermatologist. It's the same with dandruff. So if you're having it for more than 6 to 8 weeks, most people would give it up to like 3 months at least, but I would say come earlier. The earlier the better. And you have some of the symptoms that I've mentioned, including rashes on your face, your chest, and your back. Some people don't realize that they are related to the dandruff, and that is because the malassezia yeast that comes on the scalp when you're brushing or combing your hair also falls on the skin. So you have it on the face, the chest, and the back, and these are areas that have a lot of oil. The sebum-rich area. Sebum is the oil that the skin produces. And this yeast, the malassezia yeast, has an affinity for the natural sebum. That's the oil that your skin produces. So it will grow in areas where there's a lot of sebum, and this includes your scalp, your face, your chest, and your back. So you have some people having dandruff, and they're noticing that around the nose here, there's some scaliness around the nose, and sometimes on their T-zone, that's the area above the eyebrows to beside the nose, becomes lighter than other parts of the skin. This is a feature of malassezia overgrowth on the skin, and many times they have associated dandruff with it. So when I see patients having this rash on their face, sometimes they may have some rashes on the chest and the back, I ask them, do you have dandruff? And most of them will say, oh, yes, I do have dandruff. And I said, look, if you don't treat the dandruff, you're not going to be able to get rid of these rashes on your skin, because your hair or your scalp is the reservoir for this malassezia yeast that is then growing and spreading to your face, your chest, and or your back. And these rashes can be itchy and scaly as well. So that's seborrheic dermatitis, which, like I mentioned, requires specialist treatment.
That really is enlightening. I didn't know that before now. Thank you so much. But I want to take you back to something you mentioned about treatment of mild dandruff, how shampoos can help. So
Yes.
the shampoos, do they keep working for as long as you use them, or once you're done using them based on the regimen, you're free from the mild dandruff?
Well, for a lot of people, mild dandruff can last even also for a long time. Like I mentioned, it could be determined by your current state of health, your hydration. It could also be affected by the weather, how you moisturize. But in most cases, if you use an anti-dandruff shampoo and you make sure you moisturize your scalp regularly, it should clear off after a few months. But for some people, it may be more persistent. And in those cases, we say, okay, anytime you go to the salon to wash your hair, at least once a month or twice a month, use an anti-dandruff shampoo containing zinc pyrithione or containing ketoconazole, 2% ketoconazole. There are some shampoos that contain salicylic acid. So salicylic acid, zinc pyrithione, and ketoconazole are anti-dandruff agents that are present in shampoos that you can easily buy in a beauty store or a supermarket, and you want to use those to wash your hair more frequently, even with mild dandruff. So it can be recurrent, because if you have a tendency to having it, even if it goes away after 7 months, you could have a recurrence. So I just advise people who have mild dandruff to just, anytime you wash your hair, just use an anti-dandruff shampoo alongside to wash your hair, so that it doesn't come back. You could stop the anti-dandruff shampoo maybe about 3 months, but if you have a tendency to having it, there's a possibility that the dandruff could reoccur. And for some people, it doesn't. So it's very, very relative to the individual.
Thank you. Now, this next question is for those who have dry scalp. How do they make sure that they do not over moisturize their scalp into other conditions?
Yeah, thanks for that. And that's very important, because moisturizing the scalp, you also need to know how much to use and what not to use. So with the dry scalp, there are a lot of skincare products or hair care products that you can use. For African skin, usually an African scalp, you want something that would soften the hair. I like shea butter based hair moisturizers and scalp moisturizers, because it will moisturize both the hair, soften the hair, and moisturize the scalp. This might shock a lot of people, but I always say avoid things that contain olive oil. Olive oil is very common in a lot of hair care products, but olive oil can worsen dandruff. So you don't want to use olive oil containing products on your skin, on your scalp. And this is because the oleic acid in olive oil, which is the major fatty acid in olive oil, is the favorite. Malassezia love oleic acid. And so where you're feeding your scalp oleic acid, or you're rubbing oleic acid on your scalp, you're basically feeding the malassezia. So if you have malassezia induced dandruff, it might get worse with olive oil. And also the olive oil itself, the oleic acid itself, is an irritant to the skin of some people. And this is why even with babies, I always tell people, don't use olive oil on your baby's skin. It is one of the reasons why some babies have very severe cradle cap infant dermatitis. And a lot of people don't know this, but shea butter is preferable Jojoba oil is also preferable. Tea tree oil has been found to be helpful with dandruff as well. So these are some oils that you can use, but in very little quantities. You can use on the scalp. Usually you want to moisturize your scalp like every other day, not every day. And use, sparing amounts of it so you don't have too much of an oily scalp. If your scalp is too oily, it can give you breakouts on your face because some of the oil will drip, especially in the hot weather when you're sweating. Some of the oil in your scalp could drip onto your forehead and result in breakouts, what we call pomade acne, from the hair. So you don't want to use too much of oil on your hair. So a lightweight shea butter based moisturizer is actually quite good for your hair and your scalp. And you want to use that like every other day on your scalp. Some people have sprays as well, moisture sprays that you can just spray on the hair to keep the scalp moist and also the hair moist. So that's mainly a water-based spray. So that can also be used for mild dandruff.
I feel
But
like
this
it
is
would.
not sufficient for severe dandruff. Severe dandruff needs a lot more treatment.
Mm. I was going to say that I feel like a weird person because shea butter irritates my own scalp,
Oh
which is
wow.
weird. Yeah, it
Yeah,
does.
so you have like I always mention, every human being is different. And some people would not tolerate certain things. There will always be, some things that you won't tolerate. So yes, a few people have irritation to shea butter. That's why alternatives like the jojoba oil and argan oil are things that people who don't tolerate shea butter could try. Jojoba oil is very good. Tea tree oil is also very helpful for the scalp. So if you don't tolerate any one of those, you can try another one and find the one that works for you. Some people too tolerate olive oil too, but in most cases, olive oil is an irritant for the skin. And this is like evidence-based. There are studies to show this. So it's something that we need to keep in mind. But if you don't tolerate shea butter, then please by all means don't use it. Try other options for your scalp.
Thank you. Now, I ask this question for those who are forever in the organic WhatsApp group. Are there home remedies to treating dandruff, or it's just better that you go for some over-the-counter shampoo and treatments that has zinc pyrate, like you mentioned?
Okay, well, there are a few DIY hacks. One of them is apple cider vinegar, which actually has been shown to improve mild to moderate dandruff. So applying apple cider vinegar, not in its concentrated form, please, because it's very strong. But if you dilute it like, 10 times and just spray that a bit on the scalp or use that to wash out the scalp, it has been shown to reduce malassezia load on the scalp and can reduce dandruff. So that's one DIY hack that even some dermatologists um, would agree with. Others may say, let's just stick to the scientific stuff. But
Yeah.
knowing in our environment that it's not always practical to go to the hospital immediately and you want to try something at home or natural first. Yeah, if you want to try anything, you could try the apple cider vinegar on the scalp, properly diluted and then rinsed off afterwards. And that's one thing I think can help. Another thing is, like I mentioned, tea tree oil is, known to be quite helpful for dandruff as well. So you could try those before, medical in code therapy if you want to keep it organic. There are some native leaves, but I think we need to do more study on that. There's a leaf that is used for babies that have infantile seborrheic dermatitis. That's the cradle cap, what people call ELA in Yoruba. There is the alcalifa leaf that is thought to be helpful. And I am not very quick to condemn natural or herbal remedies because a lot of the medication we use today came from herbal remedies. But I believe that a lot more research is needed. on the alfalfa leaf to see if it can be, an evidence-based therapy for seborrheic dermatitis and other fungal related infections. And it is showing promising results, with that. But I would be careful to recommend it because I don't have enough evidence or data. But I know some people try that and use that, and they say it works for them.
Thank you. Sometimes when you look at the abundance of vegetation and leaf that we have, it just feels like Africa is wasting lots
Oh,
of,
yes.
but,
Oh, yes.
yeah,
We need to
because
do a lot more research. For instance, the anti-malarial that we use now, that everybody, the whole world uses, the artemisinin, it came from a leaf, a Chinese herbal remedy. But the Chinese people went further to do studies and research on it, and it shows that it does kill malaria. And they presented it scientifically, and that's why, the world now today uses artemisinin-based therapy for malaria based from Chinese herbal medicine. And I know there are so many herbal remedies in Africa that are effective, but we haven't been able to properly study them and do proper research to show that they're effective for certain things. And I'm very happy that at least a few people are starting to do that, but we need a lot more of that. And we need government support to do that research so that maybe we can, Africa can produce the next anti-malarial or the next cancer killing drug that will save millions of lives. We have the potential.
definitely, I am very sure about that. We just need to explore more, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I would have loved to take questions and calls, but unfortunately, we are out of time. Now, if we're able to catch up more about your education on skincare and everything that you do online, how can they do that?
Yeah, so please follow my Instagram and TikTok handles. I have a new page dedicated solely to skincare education. It's Fola Derma Doc, Fola Derma, DERMADOC, Doc. So Fola Derma Doc on Twitter, on Instagram, and at least 3 times a week, I have a new video discussing some important skin health tips and skin health education. So please follow at Fola Derma Doc for more. Yeah, and if you have any need for private personal consultation, you can send me a DM and we can try and work it out.
3 times a week. You are the real MVP because content creation is
Ah,
something.
I have someone helping me. I'm very busy, but it's something I think is really important. There's a lot of misinformation on skin out there, and I just felt okay, as a dermatologist, it's important that we balance, the type of information on social media because a lot of people give wrong information. So I made it like, okay, this is one of my goals for now, this period, to make sure that I put proper information out there about the skin. And, I have a wonderful team that helps me with that because, doing it on my own, I probably won't have the time, but it's very important. So we're working on it. Hello, am I audible?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear
Okay,
me
great.
now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
All right. Well, maybe that's a cue to let you go.
All right, then.
Thank you so much for being here this morning. I quite appreciate your presence. Have a
Okay.
lovely Saturday.
And you too, and everyone listening, have a lovely weekend. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
All right, Lagos, Nigeria, and world. Thank you for being a part of this show. We definitely appreciate you. And most importantly, we hope that you've been able to take 1 or 2 things that will be helpful in dealing with dandruff. You can always see the dermatologist, your physician, so that you get better insight into what is troubling you or disturbing you, that flaky, itchy skin is definitely not palatable at all. Aside the discomfort, the embarrassment that comes from having, somebody calls it gari, the white patches on your cloth after itching. Yeah, so please seek the right medical attention. But for now, we'll take a break. And when we come back, we will be having a super duper great time with the children on Curious Minds. And I tell you, there is extra juice and juicy stuff for you this morning on Curious Minds. So if I were you, I will start to dial because we have a special package to give to the children who are between 6 to 15 years of age on Curious Minds. As always, the number to dial is 014489981.
Smooth 98.1. Absolutely.
Thank you for streaming.